maybe they want a business partner, or maybe they want just a really valuable team or really deep friendships. And are you ready for the type of person that you're calling in, like to handle all that comes with that?
I am back with my business bestie, and we're going to be talking today about probably, again, one of the more common questions that we get asked about our relationship, like our friendship that goes so much deeper than business. And I think it's something that I am so proud of because I know like what has gone into cultivating like truly one of the most expansive friendships I've ever had, like the most expansive friendship that I've ever had. And it's so fun to get to do this in person.
I know.
Live.
I'm so excited. I echo that. Of all the things that we've like created and put out into the world, like our friendship is my favorite part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know or who's like newer to Powerhouse Women, Hannah is the COO. I guess if we put titles to it, CEO, founder, but really like we co-create everything that people see here. And it was really a cool story of how we even grew into the roles individually and then coming together that we're in right now. And there's so many people who I think they know that they want even just expansive friendships, like really deep, really authentic friendships. And ultimately, I think when people are saying, gosh, I just would love to find that person, I think what they're actually feeling is the energy of like the connection, the respect, and like the foundation that we have as friends before business or anything. So we've never actually recorded a podcast about kind of like that journey. And it's just probably going to be easier to send people this podcast when they ask us. So we're capturing it.
We get the DMs of like, how did you guys meet? How do we find that?
What's your meet cute?
Yes.
And you'll hear, actually, this is something we joke about all the time, but it's true. Our relationship and how much we've invested into it, both in ourselves and in each other, is equivalent to, like, we're both married to men, yes. but we've worked just as much, if not more, on our relationship with each other, which is a big foundation of, I think, what people feel.
Yeah, totally. I think that in any relationship, in order to really go to like the depths that we've been able to go and to create the type of friendship that people notice there's something different there, it feels different, it feels deeper. We have gone so far past surface level, which I think is where a lot of friendships will begin and maybe dabble in that, like, you know, just the not as deep parts of ourselves and being able to go deep and meet all these different versions of each other and all these different layers of each other and evolve together, I think is what makes our relationship so special.
And at the time we're recording this, we've only known each other about 4 years, which is wild.
4 years.
I think when I think about the time frame, do you want to just like quickly share the quick answer to how did we meet? How did we like come to know each other?
Yeah,
because there's so much more to it.
Totally. So I worked in real estate for 8 to 10 years. Yeah, around 10 years. I worked in like real estate development, real estate investing, different things like that. And I had this feeling that I was in the wrong place, which on paper made no sense, as most stories you hear this way go when people follow their intuition. On paper, I could tell people what I was doing and I felt proud. I felt like that's like where little me had thought that I would end up, is like doing all these like really big things. And in the startup world where we were like taking over industries and growing fast and doing all of that. And I had this little inkling inside of me that just kept on saying like, it's not this, it's not this. And when you're in a place of like that type of success, it can actually be really hard to listen to that voice. But I was listening to her. She kept coming. She was loud. And I remember one day, I actually wasn't even looking for jobs. I was just starting to sit with this feeling of like, why do I feel this way? Like I shouldn't feel this way on paper. And I wasn't actively looking. And I remember Lindsay had posted like a job posting for Powerhouse Women. The crazy thing for everyone listening is that I didn't actually follow Powerhouse Women. I don't even know
I don't think I knew that.
No, I didn't follow you. I didn't follow Powerhouse Women. I actually can't recall what led me to the job posting. I wish I could.
Like,
it was probably a friend of a friend.
Higher power.
It was higher power for sure. And I randomly applied for a job that Lindsay had that was so far different worlds from what I was currently doing. And I honestly think it's important to note was like a completely different pay scale, a completely different world. Like Powerhouse was just a little baby 4 years ago.
And I just got like full chills when you said that. Like, I really want to like highlight for people, you had like the position that you were in was so many people's dream. Yeah. You had status, you had a lot of responsibility. You were leading people, which is what you're best at. You're so brilliant at that. And you were like, had the opportunity to have partnership and all these things that it was. And like, I could actually cry thinking about it. Like just the risk you took and like the trust that you had in yourself without us knowing. Now we know why we were meant to be in each other's lives. But I remember at that time, even because I don't actually think I initially reached out to do an interview because I knew you were way overqualified for because to give context, at that point, I was like just starting to realize that I needed help. Now I actually needed a lot more help than I realized. But I think when you've built, you're kind of like the solopreneur journey, I think the natural thing is just to think, well, let me just get a little bit of help. But at the same time, I remember thinking to myself, because so many people just had all these stories about what you could expect to get, or that people didn't really want to work, or you would never be able to find someone as passionate as you. We hear people say that. And I just remember in my mind and in my heart, I was like, I know I can have someone join this team and this vision that feels like a dream to work with. And it was beyond like any dream that I ever even had. But I remember how much that stretched me, I think, even early on. And this is kind of like the catalyst, I think, to our story is at that point, what I realized is I sought out friendships and relationships, and I was about to do it in a work setting that didn't really challenge me, that didn't really trigger some of the things that I would need to look at if I ever wanted to have more expansive relationships.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. It's like we definitely came together in like divine timing. That's for sure. I feel like your experience of it and my experience, while they were so different, to explain, they were also like a lot of similarities. I don't know why, but this just like keeps coming through to me. Is like kind of like about my intuitive nudge and like your intuitive nudge to lean into these types of things that feel bigger or feel scary or feel like a big leap when your intuition is speaking. Is that I heard someone say the other day, they said truth is really inconvenient. And that's why most people don't follow their truth. And your intuition, where it was guiding me, felt very inconvenient. Yeah. Honestly, at the time. Yeah. And I'm sure for you probably felt a little bit inconvenient of just like, wait a second, I thought I was maybe going to go this way. And now this is like a different vision and a different level. And there's no doubt that we were there for a reason.
So we both kind of had in our own way, this very deep intuitive feeling, okay, this, like I knew of anyone that I interviewed, I was like, yes, like this is the person. And holy shit, it scares me just knowing the level of how much I'm going to have to grow to be partners with this person. And at that time, we weren't even like thinking of our relationship as business partners, although that's where it evolved. But like, I just felt your power. I felt how much it was going to force me to grow. Yeah. And that can be really uncomfortable. It can be, I mean, that's often the point where I think looking back, I used to check out. Yeah. I used to check out when I knew something was going to have me grow. And then throw in a global pandemic because we started working together in 2020, which I think just actually magnified a lot of fears that we both would have to eventually face to come to the place we are now. But it also rocked both of our worlds in that we both love certainty. We both love to know like this is what's happening. And here we were thrown into a season where everything you initially came on board to be a part of as far as the vision wasn't that anymore. Yeah. No live event. No, I mean, it was just, I don't even remember what the original vision was because it wasn't that. And that I remember being like one of the seasons where I realized how invaluable your energetic like support of me as a person and like the way we could support each other, because we really thrived.
We didn't
in
skip
that
a
season.
beat. We literally were like, okay, this is our time to serve. How are we going to do it?
It was like immediate. And I remember feeling like that for me, that was so clearly attached to our energy coming together. And it was an expansive year. We really did serve. And I think it brought us to this point where, we realized that something about the way we initially had decided to come together wasn't actually a fit for how we were both supposed to expand. So this is like our relationship story. So we took time apart. And I think that was like one of the most valuable times for me to get clear on like what Powerhouse, not what I wanted as a person, but like what Powerhouse as a vision actually deserved. And if we were going to move forward, like it had to be something that was like fully expansive. In a way that like made me want to puke.
I know. I think that's such like a beautiful part of the story too, because we hear people talk all the time about how, maybe they want a business partner, or maybe they want just a really valuable team or really deep friendships. And are you ready for the type of person that you're calling in, like to handle all that comes with that? Because I think sometimes if you're not fully ready for all the energy that comes behind that, it can lead to things like how we had to take a little break.
Yeah. And it served both of us like so well. But one of the things that it had me realize was and I think this shows up in friendship. I think it definitely shows up in like team dynamics and just like anywhere that we're allowing someone to support us, even like in a marriage. I had like some very deep worthiness to look at in order to be able to expand the way I needed to, and even allow like the friendship level of support. And I think just how much just being in your presence and us being around each other forces me to look at shit I don't always want to look at. And I don't mean that in a way. I think it's because there was from the beginning such a deep like love and respect that I knew I didn't want to bring anything less than like my best into our friendship. And so I think this is like more what we want to unpack for you guys, is like the depth of which you can have these like friendships that go beyond, like we're pretty sure we've actually lived multiple lifetimes together.
We know we have.
But what it's actually required of both of us in order to do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I obviously came back. I'm like,
Thank
that's
God.
probably like do you want to share that part of the story of just like our return to, and then what has followed after that?
Well, I remember, number one, there were so many lessons in us, taking that time apart that had me in the midst of a year where everything was so different, actually have the time to pause and be like, okay, whoa, now I know what's possible. It created a whole new vision of like what even the support I wanted for Powerhouse Women, but beyond even just selfishly what I wanted as like my friend back in my life, and made me realize like anything that was going to happen after that was going to be modeled after you, and there's actually no replacing you. And I remember just having this like intuition of like, just text her. And I basically just said like, this vision deserves to have like the power of two powerful leaders leading it. And I remember just like how scary that felt. I don't know if I was like afraid you would like reject me or just, I think I was still even just wondering if like that feeling was mutual, or wondering if I had enough to offer you in terms of like really how gifted, how fucking amazing you are, and I think that's just like the real honest truth of it, is still like that worthiness of just wondering like, do I have enough to offer someone? Yes, in a business context, but in a friendship context.
I know.
In order to like really have this be what I think we both felt it could be in terms of like the friendship first and foremost.
It's always so wild being in the presence of someone that you adore so much. And like, I'm sure the whole audience listening of just hearing like, Lindsay, what feels those feelings and those types of things are coming up, because everyone who knows you is dearly blessed to be in your presence. I'm like, asking God all the time what I did to get to be in this seat right here next to you. So it's always just funny just to reflect that back to you for a second of like, you're always worthy. You are worthy. So at that point, we're coming back together. And this is where we really start like diving into, okay, if we are going to do this, we aren't staying on that surface level that I had begun the conversation, the beginning of this podcast around. It was more like, we're going to start having these really hard conversations. We're going to have to communicate in a way that we've never communicated before and get like really clear on all of this. And that just like started something so beautiful over the last 2 years.
Yeah. And I think it started with really just knowing that whatever we're not willing to deal with between us is going to spill over into this beautiful community we're building together. Like our energy is all over all of this. Like our team's energy is all over every element. And I think we both just had like such a deep respect for each other and love for each other. And also there's two things that like for me are these landmarks of breakthroughs that I saw us both have in our own time. Number one is like maybe for the first time ever in a friendship, actually communicating what we wanted and needed with it was honesty, but from a place of like such deep love. Like I love you too much not to be honest about like how I'm feeling or how this is landing for me. And then,
which for us, I think it's worth noting is like a core wound. Like for us, that was very hard. That wasn't just like that was something where we had to like reach into the depths of our soul and like overcome beliefs that we had that was not okay to do.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about like what your experience with that? And then we'll share the second one. But this is because I actually see in my friendships, this is where I did not feel safe to be that vulnerable to share what I actually like wanted or needed, or it was just like this willingness to be like that authentic. It like physically just didn't feel safe.
Well, I think too that we have both reached a place in our lives where we're very in touch with our intuition and we both know that we're here to do really big things. We both, as do I think anyone is, but I think that we just really know we're here for something special and that there's no settling left to do. And I think when you come to the table with that belief of like, okay, this has to be everything and more, or like this actually isn't for us. And just coming from like this very vulnerable space, like I was saying, for me, a huge core wound was that I wasn't actually worthy of like taking up space with my voice. Like I wanted everyone else around me to be happy and taken care of and thriving. And if that meant that I had to be quiet or, move to the side or let someone else, be happy, I, at that time, didn't have enough of abundance mindset to realize that everyone can be happy and that there's versions of things that there's space for me in this world. And so having these conversations of actually saying like, this is what I want, this is what my vision is for myself was the scariest thing I have ever done in my life. And coming out on the other side of it, I now think it's so funny and cute. I'm like, that's so cute of that little version of me that I was just like so scared. But it was years of just lifetimes of just a core wound around using my voice.
Yeah. And I love how you tied that to the abundance mindset too, because I know so many of you listening to this are probably hearing yourself in that like, where is the misaligned belief that if you show up and if you shine and if you take up space, it's actually taking away from someone else, because that isn't the case, or you could choose to see the opposite as well. And I think the other piece I was going to say, and this kind of starts to bring us into that, is we both also weren't afraid to look at the triggers. And our triggers, our core wounds, actually just happened to be almost like mirror opposites, where we could have either continued to trigger each other doesn't always look the same. It was actually like we loved each other so much, and we both had that like, well, I want to make sure the other person is feeling, happy, and am I making them happy, that we were both kind of dimming parts of ourselves, thinking we were doing it for the other person. But it was really coming from like this old pattern of, is it safe for us to take up space and to trust that we both can in our own unique way?
Yeah. It's like, and as women as a whole, I think generations and generations of this, it's not just, us sitting here dealing with this. as women, we have been taught to be a little quieter, to not take up space, to, you know, make sure that you don't say too much or do too much. And that's just like the reality of the world that we've been living in. But the beautiful thing was that when we were able to face that, Lindsay and I actually realized that was so much power in that, because while we, for a moment there, were dimming each other, when we actually had these deep conversations and stepped into our power, it actually made the other person even more powerful, because when I evolve and when I expand, Lindsay now is able to expand. When Lindsay expands, I can expand. Yeah. So it was this beautiful mirror of like, we thought that we were like dimming ourselves to make the other one happy, but really us being the greatest expressions of ourselves is what makes us both the most powerful, because we reflect off of each other.
Yeah. And when you even said like dimming ourselves to make each other happy, the word that came up in my mind too, I think mine was coming even more from like comfort. Yeah. Which we both are so committed to our own expansion. We know better than to seek comfort, because comfort has no part in where we're going. But I think it was such a natural default pattern for me. I didn't even realize that that's what I was doing, but it was essentially, and I think this is a powerful question for us all to ask ourselves, especially as women, is like, where are you dimming yourself to make someone else comfortable? And where are you actually, by doing that, limiting their ability to evolve?
Yeah. And what really just comes to me after that is like realizing that when these feelings are coming up, they have nothing to do with the other person.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to do with the other person. They're activating something in you that you have a story around, that you have a belief around, some type of something that's holding you back. And I think what's been so beautiful about your and I's journey is that we are, in so many ways, and we'll talk a little bit more about like learning about our personalities and like how that has really supported this evolution. But we were in this beautiful like season of doing a lot of work on ourselves. And so through everything that came up, I now know that it was the most beautiful lesson that I needed, that had nothing to do with you, but you were just actually able to mirror it to me. Yeah. And what a gift from a friend to be able to be like, to be able to disassociate the fact that like, oh, this isn't her doing anything to me. This is like, why is this feeling there? And digging deep and healing it. And from that healed place coming together is like the most beautiful.
And beyond that, I think just on the other side of those realizations, because at least for me, some of them were when I realized certain things about myself or certain tendencies that I had, it felt like then I would judge myself for having that tendency or that limiting belief. But in that moment, being so willing to share it and not trying to be perfect or make sure that you're only viewing me in a certain way, to be like, I want to share this with you. And I want to tell you like what I've been like learning about myself and going through. And every time we've been willing to have like those really honest, really authentic conversations, or say, hey, this is like, this trigger is coming up and I know it doesn't have anything to do with you, but I think for both of us, verbally processing it from such a safe space of like knowing we give each other permission to evolve or space to evolve has been so healing. And I don't think I've never allowed myself to have those kind of friendships until the last, I would say like year or two. And ours has been like the catalyst to deepen that and even start to notice where I do have a few more other friends that there is that safety. Yeah. But that was new for me.
Yeah. The vulnerability piece before. I remember crying a lot of tears when we would have conversations. And I also think it's worth pointing out that a lot of our expansion hasn't just been, it's not like you and I are triggering each other constantly. It's that we've had pieces of this business that have helped be beautiful reflections. And we've also been doing so much of our own work that to be able to connect on that and share the vulnerability of like, look, I'm uncovering these things about myself that feel really, really scary, that have nothing to do with any of this, but just having that like safe space to be like, I think this about myself. And Lindsay just like holding space, still loving me on the other side of that, has created just this bond that I like can't even put into words.
I remember what's coming to my mind right now is this was just a few months ago. It was like in the fall of this last year. And I've shared a ton on the podcast just how like last year really pushed me and like stretched me in so many ways. And one of the things that I realized, I wasn't allowing myself to feel supported specifically by my girlfriends. And I remember the day I just walked through to you and I remember this felt so foreign to me. I was like, can we just set up a time to talk just about like what I'm feeling right now? It had nothing to do with like our dynamic or anything between you and I. And that felt so incredibly vulnerable and also so safe. And like, I knew I was just going to be held. And the depth of which I felt, number one, I didn't feel weak.
Mm-hmm.
I actually felt so strong. Like it felt actually strong after like you just, again, held space. I just shared with you for like an hour of like some of the things I was like really wrestling with and lessons I was learning. You didn't try to fix it. It was just like space held so powerfully. And like you held, it's like you were seeing me as my highest self, even though I, in that moment, felt like I was just not the version of me I wanted to be. And how many times I've probably robbed myself in decades of life of like feeling that connection between friends that I want a deep connection with because I'm not willing to be vulnerable, not because I want it. In that instance, it wasn't like I wanted to be perfect or come across a certain way. It was directly tied to when I looked at why am I so uncomfortable to ask for this level of support? I didn't want to be a burden.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, especially when you're seeking out friendships, I think with really powerful people, yes, we are all busy, but the moment you or Aisha or Lori or like one of my homies like need something, it does not matter. Like drop everything and like be there for each other. And I don't think I think I've always had that available and I never let it in.
I know. I think that that's like one of the most beautiful things to creating these kinds of relationships, and like what actually helps them be expansive is like actually letting someone see all the parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because when people only see one side of you, it's very hard as humans to connect with someone that is like trying to give off the perception. And I'm not saying you, this was actually like a me thing. I always wanted to have the people have the perception of me that I have everything put together. That it was like this perfection thing of like, I am very put together. My life is put together, you know, and that actually robbed me of so much vulnerability, so many special moments where I could have let people in, like you're talking about, to like really love on me. So I feel like, you know, it's a beautiful lesson in all of this is just like allowing those vulnerable conversations to unfold. And the reality is that you might have some conversations that don't go the way that you want them to. Someone might not be able to hold space for you the way that you need them to, but then you're going to have some relationships like ours where it just unfolds the most beautiful connection that you and I would not be able to have if we weren't willing to let each other see all the pieces of us, not just the pretty parts.
Yeah. And you don't really know until you allow yourself to go there and see. Sometimes you might actually feel triggered when you open up if it's a new feeling. And then that's something more for you to explore, like, well, why actually did that feeling come up? And you mentioned this before. I want to like actually talk about like, we've both done a lot of work, especially over the last 2 years, really getting to know about ourselves. Because I definitely had a lot of comparison, not with like people specifically, but a lot of like wondering if like my gifts should look like other people's gifts in a way that just had me not connected to my own. And I know we both love to nerd out on like human design. And once we started to learn about actually how we're wired, we are so beautifully connected in some ways, and we couldn't be more opposite in others. And it felt like the most freedom I've ever experienced to just learning that about myself in general in the world, to realize like, oh no, this is actually like part of my makeup, my design.
Yeah, it's helped me like lean into the most authentic version of myself, of like why I'm here, what I came here to do. Because when you know yourself authentically, you don't have to be anyone else. Because we have both started to realize through like the human design thing, I think like what makes us so freaking powerful is our own uniqueness.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be like you.
Yeah.
I love you so much. I don't want to be good at the things that you're good at. I have a different zone of genius. And like how special is that?
Yeah.
That we can just both stand in our power and be like, I actually don't want the gifts that you have.
There's a specific example coming to mind, and I want to highlight this for people because, again, this goes back to what we were saying about willing to look at the things that you get triggered by are just a massive invitation for you to look within. And we were making a decision about like switching teams for something in our business. And I remember, so I'm a generator on human design. Anyone who knows that, Hannah's a projector, which actually generator projector partnerships are really powerful. And you have an element to your personality that you actually are one of those powerful like researchers. Like you have this ability to like really get all the info that we need to make a really powerful decision. And mine tends to be more of like a gut decision. And I just remember, I remember saying to you, like, I really feel in my gut, like, this is the direction we should go. And you said, like, I really want to put together, like, I want to go through all the available options and come back and like make sure. And in the past, pre-doing this work, I actually would have, in that moment, what my internal dialogue would have been like, I'm not a good business owner. How am I willing to just trust my gut? Does she think I'm stupid? Like, I'm actually going back. I remember even in that moment being like, this is so cool because I fully understand why that is actually how you're meant to make a decision. And I want to make sure that as I'm learning to tune into my gut, that is also backed up with logic. Because I am a logical person. I'm not just someone who's like, this is just what I feel today. So for me, the more we've learned about like our unique skills and gifts that we're bringing, especially to a business environment, I mean, it's literally what makes us as successful as we are.
Totally. And the fun thing too is that we both have our different ways of coming to a conclusion, but 99% of the time we come to the same conclusion.
We do.
Yeah. Or we come to like, we'll bounce off of our conclusion and come to like a better like one that's even higher than what we had both landed on.
What would you say, if you can think of anything else, like for people who are listening to this and are like, I want that person in my life. I want that business bestie, whether it's like another entrepreneur that you're on this journey with and you can hold each other to that high standard. Like, what advice would you give for people who are like missing this type of relationship and really want to call it in this year?
Something just downloaded so clear. That was me first, like you first, like focusing on yourself first, because we want these really elevated, expansive relationships. But if you're in the midst of them, can you actually handle those people that you want to be around? Can you actually be the type of person that you want to show up as? Can you show up grounded in your authenticity when you're in those rooms of people you think you want to be around? Or are you maybe in a space where you don't know what your authenticity is yet and you would maybe mold to them? I think that at the end of the day, and you guys might end up feeling like we're broken wreck if you're listening, but it's me, my intuition first, and then putting yourself in spaces where those kinds of women that you have are elevating into, even if you're a few steps behind, but if you can hold space and be grounded and in who you are and not lose yourself, then just like putting yourself in those rooms and cut the BS. Stop having conversations around the weather. You know, like when I go somewhere now, I'm like talking about really deep things really, really fast. And if someone actually doesn't like that, then they're really not my person.
Yeah.
You know, and that's okay. So it's like but all of that is rooted in like me showing up in my authenticity.
Yes. And authenticity could look like, it could even be a new connection says like, hey, how are you? How's your week? Not just saying good if it's not effing good.
Yeah.
You know, and just noticing. And the other thing I would add to that is pay attention to where your energy is drawn. We're not actually supposed to have these deep bonds with everybody. And there's so many people that I even remember young Lindsay kind of like coming up as an entrepreneur thinking like, oh, it'd be so cool to be friends with that person. And there probably would be like something in their energy that I was being drawn to. But now I'm at the point where I've met some of the people I thought like, oh, that'd be so cool to like connect with them. And having it be so beautiful to be like, great, that was like a valuable connection. We're going to do a podcast together. We'll support each other. But that's not someone that I feel like I'm going to build that depth with. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Because the people that I've actually built that depth with are not people that like I even knew they were coming into my life until I was ready, until I started doing that work, everything that you were saying.
Yeah. And
That's
I think
so
like
beautiful.
allowing that to be okay.
Yeah.
I think that's where people get held up, is when you're in search of friendships. And for anyone that doesn't like know my story, I have had to move a lot the last few years. And I have been seeking friendships. Like I want to meet new people, and I've had to be okay with a lot of flops.
Yeah.
Because I have friendships like ours that, and quite a few, like a handful of them in my life that feel very, very special to me. And understanding, I guess flop was a hard word, but understanding that not all friendships are going to be this friendship. And keep searching until you do find those people. Keep being, keep existing and showing up as yourself until you find those people, because they are there. But there are going to be a lot of times you put yourself into a room and go, oh, I really wish I was going to meet someone that day. And like, it just didn't. And being okay with that. Not everyone's your person. Yeah.
I want to kind of start to wrap this up by talking about, I think one of the more sensitive subjects for people is when your evolution feels like it evolves out of certain friendships. And one of the things I know, even when we were talking about planning this yesterday, that is kind of, I guess you could say like a core value of ours for ourselves is not to be too tied to an identity. Like we fully do not plan on being these same women 6 months from now, a year from now. How does that start to impact relationships, or even like what we look for in friendship relationships? Because evolution is the name of the game for us.
I know. I would say it's like knowing how fast you're expanding, and like knowing that you have to put yourself around other people or other people that are also seeking that same sort of expansion. It's like if you're getting married to someone, like what life do they want to live? You know, what goals do they have? What core values do they have? It's a lot like a marriage, even if you're not like business partners, even if you're just friends, it is a lot of just looking at those like core values of that person. Because something that I think is really beautiful about our friendship is you loved a different version of me 6 months ago than you love today. You love a different version 3 months ago. And I feel the same around you. And I'll love every version that comes next, because we are evolving so quick. And there's an and to this, that it's hard to say out loud when you love someone so deeply, but I think people can resonate. If there was ever a point where our expansion was not in alignment with each other, having such a deep love for someone that you know that would be okay for our paths to kind of stop. And I believe that we came to this lifetime to do something together, and just having to really trust that, you know, for anyone listening, if you're in this friendship where you're like, oh, I felt that, I loved that person so deeply, you're actually coming into this lifetime to meet different layers and different evolutions and different people. And sometimes in order to meet that next evolution of your life, you will have to shed friendships.
Yeah.
And I think just being able to look at the immense value and growth that they led you during that season, and releasing it with love before you accidentally release it with other feelings that could stem more from anger, hurt, resentment. Why are they shrinking me? Why aren't they growing with me, or anything like that? It's like just knowing in your heart when it's like, okay, this friendship maybe is like run its course, and that's okay.
And it's like those times, because I've had them, those times it's because I ignored the initial intuition, and it was in seasons where then I was trying to mold myself. Well, who do I have to be so that we can keep this relationship? And I think that's what feels the most expansive about ours is we hold it with very open hands. It is kind of like a marriage where like we wake up every day and choose to keep co-creating business together. And we've had so many conversations about like the friendship comes first. And if it ever were like this business wise isn't expansive for one or both of us, we'll have that conversation.
Yeah.
Whatever is necessary to preserve the friendship. And I feel like that, not just permission to evolve, but the last thing I wanted to say was we actually had like a very honest conversation. It was probably like one of the most expansive conversations that I've ever experienced just a few months ago, where I think we were finally like really honest about how much we were allowing these our own inner beliefs and the last remnants of that to have us stay smaller on behalf of the other person, all that BS. And it was like this honest conversation of this is either wildly expansive for both of us and we both bring that version in, or let's not play around because we are here to like do some big epic stuff. And I remember just like that immediate upgrade of being like, this person literally sees all my stuff in the most beautiful, loving, supportive, held way. I now not only have that safe place where I can be, I love how Lori puts it, like the crash pad and the launch pad. It's like, I can't hide around you. And I've never been willing to like be held to that standard because of my own fears. And I feel like this is such a beautiful conversation to document because people are going to see some pretty radical growth and shifts over, let's just say like the next 5 years. It could be faster, but I really want people to get like how much this friendship, this relationship is the catalyst for that. We are both really powerful on our own, but what we are together is beyond human comprehension.
I just got I think this might have just been a childhood memory. You know that Kim Possible, like Unstoppable song just came through my mind. Unstoppable.
We need cartoon character versions of ourselves. I'm now imagining like the Powerpuff Girls.
Oh my gosh.
Our version of that. But I just honor everything that we've been through to get to these versions of ourselves. And I feel so clearly like we're just scratching the surface of our own individual greatness, but like collectively what people are going to feel. And it's the thing that I'm most proud of is the relationship that we've cultivated through it.
Same. I'm so excited. This new energy that we've claimed is magnetic.
I'm sweating actually a lot.
Like, you'll see.
So for those of you listening, your person is out there. That goes for romantically.
Yeah.
And also you really can have the supportive friendships, both in business and life that you dream of. And I love that intuitive download you had, your beautiful brain, you first. I feel like that's the perfect way to tie this with a pretty bow. You first. No, you first.
You.